David Kelly. I'm the founder of the organization, colleague of Alexander R. Cohen, who's our speaker this morning, and all day. So he has been building up his lecture muscles for months. He's at the Atlas Society. Alexander's role is managing editor of a special project that we've had, a business rights center, defending the rights of business people who are targets of prosecution by the state, the SEC, Justice Department, and also defamation, really, by journalists during all the scandal, whenever they get a whiff of scandal. So Alexander's been writing a regular blog and working with the other part of that Business Rights Center team, Roger Donway, who will be here during the main part of the conference. Alexander's background is both in philosophy and in law. He graduated from American University, undergraduate degree in journalism, then a law degree from University of Pennsylvania, and then studied philosophy at Sydney University of New York, which is an excellent school, and then transferred to the University of Virginia, where he was an advisee of Lauren Lamaski, one of the most prominent libertarian political philosophers in the country. So without further ado, I want to welcome Alexander to begin the overview of Objectivism. Alexander.
Thank you, David. Imagine you could be free from all the unchosen duties people claim you owe to others, from duties to your parents or relatives, to neighbors or passers-by, to your country or your government, even to God's. Imagine that there was no one you had to obey, nothing you had to do. Imagine a world in which the only things you do are the things you want to do, and you do them because you see the value in them. For centuries, said Ayn Rand, the battle of morality was fought between those who claimed that your life belongs to God and those who claimed that it belongs to your neighbors, between those who preached that the good is self-sacrifice for the sake of ghosts in heaven and those who preached that the good is self-sacrifice for the sake of incompetence on earth. And no one came to say that your life belongs to you and the good is to live it. That is what Ayn Rand said. That is what I say. That is what Objectivism says. Your life belongs to you and the good is to live it. Whatever you do, whatever goals you seek, Objectivism says you should choose them, and you should choose them because of how they contribute to your life. This includes the work you do to support yourself and the things you do for fun. It also includes your relationships, business relationships, friendships, romances, even relationships with parents and children. Whatever relationships you enter, whatever relationships you stay in, whatever work you put into those relationships, you don't have to have them. They are not burdens you must carry, whether they are good for you or bad. It is only good to enter them, be in them, and invest in them, if you do so for your own good. Even the value of politics needs to be grounded in your life, or it's not worth being political. Objectivism supports a free society because in a free society, you can pursue your own good, and I can pursue mine. And your decision to work for a free society, if you so choose, should be based on what that decision offers you, both how your life would be better if you made your society freer, and how your life is enriched by working in that cause. You don't have a duty to work for my freedom. The question is, why is it valuable for you? And I'll be addressing that question at great length on Saturday. Because objectivism holds that your life belongs to you and the good is to live it, the purpose of the objectivist ethics is to help you live. The whole objectivist ethical system, which will be the focus of this lecture and Lecture 3, is a set of mental tools for surviving, flourishing, and being happy. Indeed, that is the purpose of the whole objectivist philosophy, not just the ethics. That's what objectivism sets out to offer. But why should you take that offer? If you came in here with a different ethical view, one that opposes selfishness, why should you become an objectivist? Why give up the ethical standards that you've embraced so far? Well, to identify the best of any kind of thing, you need to know what the purpose of that kind of thing is. So, for example, if you're asked, which is better, a sharp sword or a dull one, which is it? Sharp sword. But what if the question is, what's the best fencing foil, the sharp one or the dull one? The dull one. Well, isn't that a contradiction? No, because the purpose of a sword and the purpose of a fencing foil are different. The point of a sword is to cut. The point of a fencing foil is to poke someone and thereby score a point. It's better if it's dull because you don't want to injure the guy you're fencing with. For any kind of man-made object, including swords, fencing foils, and ethical systems, the one best suited to its purpose is the best one. So if we want to know what the best ethical system is, we have to start by asking, what's an ethical system and what's its purpose? An ethical system is a code of values, an organized set of goals. More than that, it's a body of knowledge, or alleged knowledge, about what values are worth pursuing for a human being. So why do we need such knowledge? What's its purpose? One of the most important facts about human beings is that we make decisions. When you make a decision, you have multiple options. And we don't have automatic standards by which to make those decisions. We don't automatically know what sorts of actions will have what results, and what sort of results are worth pursuing or avoiding. Yet our decisions have substantial effects. They can lead to survival or death, pleasure or pain, love or loneliness, wealth or poverty, and so forth, for ourselves and for others, including others who are important to us. If we know which of the actions open to us will lead to what effects, then we can choose the effects by choosing our actions. And if we know what values we're trying to achieve, then we can choose the actions that contribute to achieving those values. That's the purpose not just of moral knowledge, but of all knowledge. Knowledge of a programming language guides your choices when you write code. Language of chess strategy guides your choices when you play chess. Moral knowledge, which is what a correct ethical system would give you, is knowledge of the most fundamental values and the most abstract ones. It's relevant to all your choices, and especially to the most important ones. It tells you what values are worth pursuing and why. I've used the term value, but I haven't explained it, so let me do so now. A value is that which one acts to gain and or keep. That means that calling something a value only makes sense in the context of a valuer, someone who acts to gain and or keep it. That's why value is relational. A value is a value to someone who values it. And if there's a reason to value something, it has to be for some purpose. If I act to gain a new computer, for example, it's for the purpose of using it. Notice that this purpose is itself a value. If I value the computer for the purpose of using the computer, then that means I value using the computer. When I act to gain and keep a computer, it's as part of acting to gain the activity of using the computer. So then the question is, why do I want to use the computer? Well, for example, to prepare lectures. That sets up a chain of values. The value of the computer depends on preparing lectures. But what makes preparing a lecture a value to me? And what makes that a value? We could go on with that sort of question seemingly indefinitely, seemingly infinitely. But if every time I say I value something for some purpose, then I need to say why I value that purpose, then I seem to be valuing things for no real reason. Each link of the chain may hang neatly on the one before, but unless there's something solid on which everything else can hang, everything hangs on nothing. It takes a very special kind of value to anchor that chain, your own life. Your life is a value that consists of actions, at least some of which have the purpose of gaining and keeping your own life. You act to pursue the value of your life, and then, having life, you use it acting to pursue the value of your life. Indeed, living means acting, at least to some extent, in order to keep living. And all of your actions are part of your life. Acting to gain or keep a value implies a possibility of not gaining or keeping it. In the case of life, not keeping it means dying. You face a constant alternative. If you do not live, you die. If you do not live in a way that preserves your life, unless someone else saves you, you die. It is because you face this constant alternative that we can say things are good or bad for you. They promote or endanger your existence. So why should you adopt the objectivist ethics? Well, one might answer, because it's an ethics based on the value of life that tells you how to pursue and achieve that value. And that is indeed the basis and goal of the objectivist ethics. But wait, what is that should? What does it mean? There's no basis to say you should or must do something except in order to achieve some value. And the argument has shown how your life can anchor your chain of values if you value life, but it hasn't shown that you must value life. Indeed, because the argument proposes valuing life for its own sake and not as a means to some other value, it can't say that you must value your life. There's nothing for that must, remember the chain, to hang on. Not only that, but if there were something in that argument that said you must value your life, then objectivism would not fulfill the promise I made at the beginning of this lecture, to free you from having to do things. You'd have to live, and you'd have to do all the things you need to do in order to live. If you are going to have the radical freedom that objectivism promises, life itself must be a choice. So if the objectivist morality hangs on the choice to live, why should you make that choice? You might be surprised that I even have anything to say about that. After all, I've just told you that I can't give you an argument that says you must choose to live. Indeed, if you can't value anything without valuing your life, it seems there's no case to be made. What can I appeal to if you don't already value your life? I can't say you should value your life in order to work because you can't, at least rationally, value your work without valuing your life. It's a circle. I can't say you should value your life for the sake of your friends because you can't value your friends, at least rationally, without valuing your life. Another circle. I can't say you should value your life in order to promote liberty. You get the idea. The solution is you have to look from within the circle. If there are activities you enjoy, those are parts of your life that you do value. And because you can only have those values, or any other values, if you live, you have reason to value your life. Yes, if you stopped valuing your life, all those values would go away. But if you do value your life, even parts of it, even a little bit, you can look at your life and see what you love in it. This is an exercise worth doing from time to time when you're not seriously considering dying. Ask yourself what you're living for, what aspects of life you really value. Then ask yourself how you can pursue more of the values that make your life worth living. And if you ever do seriously consider dying, you might ask the same questions. Instead of focusing on what's going wrong or what you're losing, take an inventory of the values you have found. Ask yourself what you want to find again. If you do choose to live, then values are possible. You can value things because they contribute to your life. And because you are living, and as part of living, you can act to gain and keep your life and your other values. And if you choose to live, some values are required. They're required in the sense that you need them in order to live. But this is still an opt-in morality. These values are only required if you choose to live. The requirement follows from your choice. Some people seem to find this disappointing. Objectivism says some people have no reason to be moral because they do not choose to live. They opt out of morality. But such critics seem to be starting from the premise that morality is a burden that has to be imposed on you. One of the glories of objectivism is that our morality is not a burden. It's a tool offered to help you live and enjoy your life. There are no unchosen burdens in objectivism, not even your life. Objectivism isn't here to crush you with duties, but to equip you with virtues in order to live and flourish and be happy if you make the choice to live. And now we can see why you need a code of ethics. Not just to guide your actions for any random purpose or by any random standard, but to identify the values you need to pursue in order to live. Ayn Rand's greatest achievement in ethics was making that explicit and basing her system on taking human life as your standard and your own life as your purpose. That's why she called her morality the morality of life. Because man has a specific nature, because there are certain values that a human being needs to achieve if he's going to live, there are moral principles that apply to every one of us, principles that tell us how to live as a human being. A human being has the ability to think, the ability to act according to his judgment, and the ability to create the values he needs to live. And if he's going to live, he needs to exercise those abilities. And there's a lot more to be said about man's nature. We'll discuss a lot of it over the next 4 lectures, but there will always be more to say. According to objectivism, the standard of morality, as distinguished from its purpose, is the life of man qua man. That is, what the life of a human being, as a human being, requires. What a human being needs to do in order to live. At the core of this standard is survival. That is, continuing to exist. But there's much more to a human life than that. There's living as a human being. That is, living by the methods of a human being. That means practicing the virtues. But what are the virtues? They're not just anything that people or traditions may call virtues. Virtues are the ways of acting that tend toward survival, the character traits and principles of action by which you can achieve the values that sustain your life. Foremost among the virtues is rationality. Rand does not use the word flourishing, but she does speak of living a life proper to a rational being. I interpret that as flourishing, and the interpretation of flourishing that I'm presenting today is one I've worked on over the years. That's part of what open objectivists do. We develop the philosophy. I think of survival and flourishing as dimensions of life. Living longer and living better. Living for more time and living more like a human being are both ways of having more human life. They're both ways of doing more of the actions that sustain yourself as a rational being. But while the objectivist morality identifies some values as important for every human being, the reason it does this is to identify the values each human being needs to pursue for himself or herself. These values are universal in the sense that for each and every individual, pursuing and achieving these values will help that person live. But that doesn't mean that if you choose to live, you need to pursue these values for everyone. Quite the contrary. It means that each and every individual, if he wishes to live, needs to make his own life his guiding value. When we discuss the virtues in Lecture 3 and friendship in Lecture 5, we'll see that living for yourself often gives you reasons to help others. But the justification for that will be grounded in your life. That means rejecting the notion that morality is about doing good for others, be it all of humanity, your family or tribe, your society or country, or whoever else. If you make any other person or any group your goal, you're bleeding off the resources you need in order to sustain your life. In this respect, among others, the Striker's Oath from Atlas Shrugged states an essential principle. If you try to live for another man or other men, your life is what you're giving up. John Galt, of course, is a hero. And the phrase, "the hero in your soul," in the title of this course, comes from his speech. But what does it mean to call someone a hero? Let's consider some examples of heroes. We could start in the political world with some of the founding fathers. And Frederick Douglass, who escaped from slavery and became a great orator in the cause of freedom. From the philosophical world, we can add Ayn Rand and Aristotle. Some of my favorite heroes are fictional. Seen here, Dagny Taggart, Harry and Hermione, and the revolutionary students from Les Mis. And let's add a scientist who revolutionized our understanding of the world, Charles Darwin. And I will add a disclaimer. Some of these people aren't entirely heroic. Actually, there may be things to be said against every one of them. But on the whole, I think these people can be regarded as heroic. So based on this, how can we define a hero? To start with, of course, a hero is a person. But not just any person qualifies. One thing that comes to mind is that a hero is someone who exercises extraordinary virtue, and especially extraordinary courage. Thus, revolutionaries tend to qualify. And a hero is someone who applies that virtue in pursuit of values that are both important and of a large scale. And this was basically the definition I had in mind when I started writing this discussion. Heroes exemplify the best of human potential. I'm putting this forward as a definition, albeit a tentative one. The word also has a relational sense. An individual's hero is a person who exemplifies human potential in a way that person also aspires to. So here, a definition: a person who exemplifies to a high degree or in some aspect the best of human potential. Objectivism challenges each of us to exemplify the most valuable aspects of human potential. To be rational, to be productive, to shape ourselves by the standard of man's life, and to shape our world by our own vision. It's an ethic focused on achieving values, not on avoiding evils. Sure, it says don't live by plunder, but more importantly, it says produce and trade. It says don't waste your life, but more to the point, it says enjoy your life. And when I say that objectivism is focused on achieving values, I don't just mean, although I do mean in part, the fundamental and abstract values that are central to a lecture on ethics, values such as life or a good character. If something is really a value, it contributes to your life. So the morality of life is concerned with achieving all kinds of values. It's in favor of building a career and making money and creating art and upholding freedom and loving your friends and all of the values that go into a good life. And it offers guidance for all these things, practical guidance to help you with your career, your friendships, and so on. Because the objectivist ethics is a guide to surviving, flourishing, and being happy, objectivists reject the distinction between the moral and the practical. In the long run, we recognize the moral is the practical. Because it helps you achieve your values, the objectivist morality is not a restraint or a burden, it's a value. You may have noticed I titled Lecture 3, Valuable Virtues. The virtues in objectivism are valuable, and they're valuable because they help you to attain other values. So objectivists don't have to avoid doing the right thing in order to prosper. Quite the contrary. We expect to make our lives better through morality. On the objectivist morality, the same acts can be both morally heroic and acts that make the person who does them better off, including in a simple material sense. There's a great illustration of this in Atlas Shrugged. Dagny Taggart shows great courage, independence, and productiveness in building the John Galt line. That is a truly heroic endeavor. And what outcome does she expect? She says, quote, "I expect to make a pile of money on the John Galt line. I will have earned it." Of course, money isn't the only reward. I remember a conversation one year, I don't remember which year, at the end of the Atlas Society graduate seminar when David commented to me about how wonderful it was to find a community of intellectuals seriously studying, independently thinking about, and openly debating issues in objectivist philosophy. And I pointed out that David hadn't found that community, he had created it. The Atlas Society and the open objectivist movement exist because David heroically stood up for those virtues more than 20 years ago and built this organization upon them. Because he did that, he gets those kinds of discussions. And since he's an objectivist philosopher, those kinds of discussions are something he really values and enjoys. And all the rest of the benefits that he and I and you and everyone involved in this event get from the Atlas Society are possible because 25 years ago, David was willing to take up that battle and do the work of building this organization. Discussions of objectivism aren't the only thing we can expect to enjoy. The philosophy gives us reason to expect pleasure in a lot of our activities, if we live well. We experience physical pleasure and pain automatically. They reflect what's going on in our bodies, what evolution says is good or bad for us. But while emotional pleasure and pain are also automatic, they are based on a standard held by the mind, subconsciously. On the basis of that subconscious standard, your emotions deliver an instantaneous report on whether things are going well for you or badly. They respond to what you take to be your long-range interests, to the well-being of other people and institutions, to evidence about whether you live in a kind of world that suits you, whether you're the kind of person who can handle the world. Thus, for example, you might feel glad or relieved if your country defeats an enemy, but just the opposite if that enemy defeats your country. And thus, if you think disasters are natural and permanent, and you see yourself as helpless, you might feel thoroughly ground down by a misfortune. But if you see yourself as competent, if you see misfortune as the exception rather than the rule, you might take it as a challenge and an occasion for resolve, if not excitement. Rand called your subconscious view of human nature and reality your sense of life. Now, what you take to be good or bad for you depends on your values. So since emotions depend on what you take to be good or bad for you, your emotions are affected by your values. That's why your emotions can't serve as a standard of value. That would be saying value whatever it is that you happen to value. Joy is an emotional response to the achievement of values. The feeling you get when you get something, you subconsciously assess as a value. But sometimes you both get a value and defeat a value at the same time. Then you might experience a clouded or contradictory joy. For example, suppose you know that you need to get a project done very soon, and you stop to eat a meal. The meal is a value, and you might enjoy it. But at the same time, you'll have a bad feeling because you're diverting time to the meal that you need for your work. Happiness isn't like that. Happiness is a state of non-contradictory joy, the subconscious assessment that you are achieving your values and not working against them. If you are living by the virtues that promote your life, then you are not acting in ways that destroy your values. Instead, you are acting in ways that promote your life, ways that contribute to the achievement of your values. And you are developing and reinforcing the habits that make you a person who promotes your own life, thus securing your values in the long run. It is, of course, impossible to pursue one value without destroying another if your values themselves conflict. That's an additional reason to have a clear, rational code of values, so that your values do not conflict, or if specific values do, so that you can choose and know that you are still pursuing your highest values. And it's impossible to achieve your values if they conflict with reality, if they are impossible, or if they call for you to act in ways that, given the facts, destroy your values. So you need a code of values that is attuned to the facts of human nature and to the world in which we live. And it's impossible to achieve your values if you are not aware of the relevant facts, if you do not indeed focus on the relevant facts and act accordingly. So you need an ethics, and for that matter a philosophy, that direct your attention to reality. Objectivism is just such a philosophy. Although pleasure, joy, and happiness are great values, they provide little or no moral guidance. That's because what gives you pleasure, joy, and happiness depends on what you value. So if you try to use them as your moral compass, you're actually just following whatever you happen to value. For example, if you find pleasure in watching TV and you therefore decide to just sit and watch TV, you won't accomplish much. You certainly won't live a heroic life that way. But the three values that are called Objectivism's cardinal values do supply guidance. Self-esteem is the conviction that you are worthy of life, that you are worthy of happiness, that you can achieve these things, and that it's good for you to have them. Part of that is simply seeing yourself as an efficacious person, as someone who accomplishes things. And part of it is seeing yourself as entitled to accomplish these things for yourself. I haven't used the term much yet, but self-esteem has been the implicit theme of this lecture and will keep coming back throughout the course. One of the great heroes of self-esteem, in my view, is Frederick Douglass. He had the self-esteem to stand up to the men who tried to break him and make him accept the life of a slave. And he had the self-esteem to want to control his own life, his own effort, and the product of that effort. Before he became famous advocating the freedom of others, he got his own by escaping. And his passion didn't just come from his judgment that what was being done to others was unjust, but from his sense that what had been done to him was outrageous. Reason is, in short, your mind, your faculty of identifying reality so that you know how to act effectively in it. Ayn Rand stands out as a hero here for her brilliant insights across a wide range of philosophical questions. I'll have more to say about reason in the next lecture. But of the three, it's purpose that serves the greatest organizing role. Purpose refers primarily to the productive purpose you choose, the values you choose to create in your professional life. It's also been interpreted to apply to having purpose in everything you do, even when it is not directly focused on that purpose. A human being lives by creating the values he needs to sustain himself. But since only particular things exist, to create is to create something in particular. And that means you need to choose the kind of value that you want to create. For example, Nikola Tesla, seen here posing with electricity, chose to create inventions. Ayn Rand chose to create novels. If you are clear about your productive purpose and you are faithful to it, it organizes your life. Many other values will follow from it. For example, Ayn Rand wanted to write novels about ideal men. And therefore, she had to define an ideal man. And that meant she had to do the philosophical work to know what an ideal man would be and do. She performed a revolution in philosophy in order to write novels, just as the hero of her masterpiece performed a revolution in physics in order to build a motor. But the organizing power of your productive purpose extends well beyond such obvious matters as learning what you need to know in order to accomplish some task. For example, you may need to live in a particular city to do the kind of work you want in the way you want. Everything from what you wear to whom you socialize with may be shaped by your productive purpose. Purpose needs to be gained and kept in that you need to choose it. You need to choose it in the sense that there are innumerable purposes that a person might choose, and you have to pick the purpose of your life. If the purpose isn't a common one that many people choose, you may need to define it for yourself. And even once you've chosen it, you have to choose it again and again, continually, by making sure that whatever else you choose contributes to it. Even rest can be understood as a chance to recuperate in order to go back to your work. If it isn't well defined and clear to you what your purpose is, you may find yourself adrift, with your life not well organized. And that means that you may be pursuing values that actually work against what you really want. For example, suppose that the work you really want to do is to act. If you adopt the career of an actor as the purpose of your life, the work of an actor as the purpose of your life, you'll know that until you can support yourself by acting, you need another source of income. But you need to make sure that it's flexible enough to accommodate your acting. Taking a job with a strict schedule that's not compatible with auditions and gigs would be very costly. Not just any purpose will do. My own good was my purpose, Hank Rearden tells the court in Atlas Shrugged, and I despise the man who surrenders his. If you choose a purpose of serving others, you are not treating yourself as your own purpose. You are making the good of others your purpose and undermining your self-esteem. That doesn't mean that other people have nothing to do with your purpose. Rearden himself made his metal for trade. He didn't need a huge pile of metal. He wanted to sell it to other people. But a product you produce for trade exists independently of the other person's mind. Even a song exists apart from the audience that pays to hear it. And the creator judges the value of the product himself in terms of what it can do for a human being who's prepared to use it. And of course, when you trade, you're acting for your own sake. For those of us who work in the cause of liberty, this can be a bit complicated. Exercising power over others, even in the context of justified laws, is a classic example of a dependent purpose. Even liberating others seems to have its goal in them. They're the ones who become free. But we do create things that have independent existence. I created these lectures. I created the booklet Myths About Ayn Rand. I create commentaries. And even when you create a statute or a judicial ruling, that is a creation apart from whether anyone obeys it. A proposed bill exists whether or not it passes, and it's something that a legislative craftsman has created. And we can judge our creations. And we can work for our own sake, for the joy we take in creating what we create, for the money that we earn, and for the value of our cause. After all, we aren't just in it for other people's freedom. We're in it for our own.